Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the PivotBoss pre-market video for Tuesday, January 8th, 2019. I am Frank Ochoa, aka PivotBoss. Here's a look at the daily time frame of the ES. Thank you so much for joining me yesterday afternoon for our monthly market outlook for the month of January. That has been posted here to our analysis playlist, but I will also post it to the site as well, so you should see that here shortly if you haven't already. Here's a look at the daily time frame of the ES. One thing we talked about over the last week and over the last couple of days, especially last night, is that this was a pretty solid bounce here. Really solid. It happened in the thick of the holidays there. But the pullback and being able to hold 2450 was very important because this rejection was strong enough to suggest that we were likely headed back to this FOMC key level right there, and that is 25.86.5. And so that's the idea here, is that we get a little bit higher to get into that zone. But once we get into that area, and especially 2600 from below, we're now dealing with prior support that has turned into resistance. And so that's where we could begin to see longer term weakness that enters the picture here. If there is a rejection here off of the 2600s in this LVN, we could easily be looking at the very least, another double dip of this low, maybe into 2400, 2450, maybe even much lower depending on the intensity of the drop. So again, we're coming into the point here where we're hitting our short-term target, which was the previous month's midpoint up to as high as the FOMC key level. The fact that we have hit the midpoint now from that high to this low, that midpoint right there, gives us a new key range to work off of. So you can take that high, low, and midpoint and give yourself a new key range. That key range is going to be very important for this year, especially early on. And again, if any test down here occurs, that could be an early rejection that brings it back up. Failure to hold there could start to work toward the extensions down below. So we have some key levels here to watch for the ES. Very similar situation for the NQ. You can see here from that December high to the December low, prices pushed back to the midpoint of that range, and now you have yourself a nice key range. The other thing that we have that's working for us is, again, a very clear target up above. That's 65.93. Again, this was a strong enough low after this initial sell-off to suggest that we were likely bouncing back toward the FOMC key level. And usually after taking it offered and going back to prior support, bears would also look to keep it offered. So again, it would not be surprising if after this short-term move higher, we start to see some weakness. So we have to see how does price respond to this zone up here, because if there's any rejection of 66s, again, very similar to the ES, we may see some degree of pullback from these highs. All right, taking a look at crude oil, up another 1.17% today. Does not show any signs of weakness just yet. We did come into the 49.17s from below. Prior support went offered, becoming resistance here after this pop. This is the biggest move higher that we've seen since before the sell-off from those 77s. So that's a pretty solid move. I mean, you're talking 42 and change up to nearly 50. Very clear area of support here. Every time it hits a new high, it pulls back a little bit but continues higher. Again, this right now is right at the cusp of either showing rejection back down to the recent support and much lower, or finding acceptance above 50 opens up a move to 55. So we either have another 5 handles back up, or we see another return back toward 44 or perhaps lower. It all happens right here in the zone. One thing to keep in mind is that we're trading right around value, and anytime that happens, it could be a sticky price for a while. Price could continue to chop above and below it for quite a while before we actually see a decisive move. So just keep that in mind. All right, let's take a look now at Bitcoin. This one's been up a little bit here lately. One thing we talked about before was Bitcoin sitting on 6K, and if it can't get any lift away from that level, it likely has to run the stops down. I mentioned that once we got near to 3K down here, that this would be seen as an opportunity to perhaps double back towards 6K and 6,400, which is value 63.83. So far we're seeing a bottoming pattern here. We've seen price bounce nicely a couple of times. We're seeing some rounded action as this thing compresses here. So holding 3K again, as I mentioned before, if we auctioned all the way down through this area, it would not be out of the question to think we can't come back up to that zone. Now what happens from there, who knows, but to take it from 3K or 32.50 and to be able to double it is not a bad idea here in the near term. Any failure to get above 44s though could be a problem. Alright, that is it for now. We'll see how this plays out heading into the new session of trading. Good luck, trade well, and I'll see you in the trading room.